there isn't a week that goes by I look on Bandcamp, I'm just like, yo, there's like at least 3 demos coming out from somewhere in Indonesia or Malaysia. I'm just like,
Right.
It's Marvin, your cousin Marvin Berry. You know that new sound you looking for? Well, listen to this.
Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. This is another episode of the Scoped Exposure podcast. I am beyond excited, beyond grateful to welcome a good hardcore friend that I've made over the last year or so, Jack from What It Takes blog and Hostile Takedown in the motherfucking building. Thank you so much for coming on the show, my friend.
oh, it's my pleasure, man. I'm really excited to be talking to you. Meeting of the minds. Really.
Meeting of the minds, damn right. No, I think how Jack and I met, I'm not sure of maybe the first time that we maybe crossed paths, but I've always loved seeing what other people do when it comes to content creation or in this scene, whether it's through a podcast, a blog, a zine, anything of that matter. And Jack is one of those individuals that I can really see putting in the work, putting in the time and the hustle, and making a lot of really cool projects. So, we've done a number of different collaborations, whether it was having you and Dakota take over the Listen Up playlist. I think both of you were the first, I guess, iteration of that.
I believe so.
And there's been plenty of crossover as far as like sharing different bands. I've hit you up, many late Sunday nights to be like, hey, what are other bands that I can put on this monthly recap? So, if it wasn't apparent through social media, I just want to, give you my roses and kind of just, say that I really appreciate you and really respect what you do. And I'm really glad to have you on the show.
It means the world, man. I like that expression about the roses. That's very cute.
Yeah,
very
I
nice.
can't remember. Someone told me that. I think I was just talking about how it's crazy how much this podcast has grown, and I'm able to like bring on bigger guests and guests that like mean a lot to me as far as like my hardcore journey is concerned. So they use the expression of like, yeah, you're able to give your roses, and I love that sentiment of just being able to be like, thank you for screaming into a microphone or, like playing the drums or, going on tour to my weird part of the world, because it actually had an impact on me to be into this shit as much as I am. So, we've been chatting about music, but before we get super deep into the convo, we got to check some bevs.
Okay.
So Jack, I'm really excited for what you're bringing to the table. Let the people know what you're going to be sipping on.
I got 2 drinks. I wanted to get something that's like more water-based, just like sparkling water, because that's what I like to drink. And then I'll start with this. It's a hibiscus super drink called Hibo. You can actually see through the can, and that's kind of what attracted me to it. I was just in Earth Fair, and I was like, yo, I can see exactly what's going on in here. And I've never really had hibiscus tea or anything. So I was like, I'm going to give this a shot. And it's got caffeine in it, and it tastes really good. Honest to God, I've had every flavor of it, and I rock it and buy it at least once or twice a month. It's good. And then, yeah.
Sorry, just to hit on the Hibo or Hibo. One of those?
I guess, yeah, Hibo. I've always said Hibo, like hibiscus. So I guess
right.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll use Hibo for the rest of the episode. But is the can? Is it still a can or is it glass? Because
it's actually like
changing.
I guess like a little bit of like a harder plastic. Like if I squeeze it, it'll give a little bit. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But it's got like a top that a aluminum can would have. That's so crazy.
Yeah, it's really neat. I wish more beverages would do that, because I really like to see what I'm drinking. It sounds kind of silly to say, but like when you go to a restaurant, you get like a clear glass, you see what's being poured into it, and you're drinking it both cans. Sure. You're kind of just don't really care about it, or you're not thinking about it. You just kind of sip. So it's neat.
Yeah.
It's a neat concept.
Yeah. it's a little bit of a flex when, if you're a straight, like I know many straight edge dudes who will like get a nice glass, put like some ice in it, and then pour their Red Bull like over
Oh yeah,
ice or whatever.
yeah.
So, but yeah, like, there's been plenty of even some of the drinks from New Level, the brewery that we're sponsored by, and like the can is like a dark blue and black, and then you pour it and it's like this Hulk green color. So
Yeah.
yeah, sometimes that's kind of cool to actually see what you're what you're putting into your body for sure.
Yep.
So what's the second bev? I cut you off in the middle
Oh
there.
yeah, I'm probably gonna butcher this. I had to actually look up how to pronounce it because it's Welsh. It's Famfleer. It's called Source.
Oh,
Yeah, sparkling water. I was
it's
put onto
bougie.
this by like one of my friends. He just happened to like he's probably had every single sparkling water you can imagine that's available
Yeah.
in the U.S.
Hmm.
And he found this the other day at Earth Fair as well. And I was just like, dude, I love Wales. I love. I'm just gonna give a quick plug to Nuclear Family Records. Love those guys.
Love that.
And
Yeah.
the water's good too. It's got like a weird. I wouldn't say weird, but it's a different aftertaste. You get this kind of like minerally citrusy taste, which I kind of like in water. And so
Hmm.
I've already drinking one of these last night. I'm gonna drink another one probably the entire podcast. So
That's crazy. And especially getting into the summer months, hydration is, very, very important. So, drinking one or two of those is not too out of pocket to do.
oh no, yeah, it's gonna be 90 degrees today down here in Virginia. So
Damn. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's been like, it's always having to do the conversions between Celsius and Fahrenheit, but like here in Calgary it was like 30 degrees Celsius, so I think that's in the neighborhood of 90, 95.
wow.
So, yeah, it's
Mm.
Alberta specifically is kind of like one of those very non-humid, like very dry kind of provinces. So like when the heat is happening, it's happening. um so yeah, great bevs to check. I don't think those have ever been premiered on the show, so I always kind of like to keep a running tally, like how many Red Bulls
Okay.
do I see, how many sparkling waters. So I always appreciate the people coming in clutch and really bringing some unique things. I've only done one podcast with this bev, so this will be my second. This is the new level craft soda. So
Mm.
it's a mocktail mule kicker is the name, and it's like ginger, mint, and lime, like you would have a Moscow Mule, but just non-alcoholic.
Nice.
Yeah, Drew and everyone at New Level just dropped this, and it's like my go-to thing. Ironically, I've given out more than I've actually have because I'm just so excited. I just want all my friends to try it. So
Mm.
I'm gonna have to go back in the next couple days and probably stock up. So yeah, that's what I'm gonna be drinking.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I saw
All
you
right.
post about it the other day and I was like, that looks so neat. I just like the layout on the can and just the flavors. I'm big on ginger now. I used to
Mhm.
kind of not be, but I do a lot of kombuchas and I've had like ginger ale before and it's all really good for you.
Yeah, I feel like ginger is one of those things as you grow up and like I don't know about you, but I was a super picky eater growing up. So
Mm.
I was like, I'm vegetarian now, but like back then it was like meat and potatoes and I didn't want to eat my vegetables and all that kind of bullshit. But I think as you grow up, you kind of have like, oh, like there's all these different flavors and you can appreciate those a little bit more. And ginger, like you said, it is really good for you and can be a very good flavor switch in everything you do. So that being said, oh, I was gonna cheers you. I was like, there was
Oh
something
yeah.
in between asking you the first question. So cheers to you, Jack. Cheers to everything you're doing with what it takes. So you're no stranger to the podcast. I'm sure you've listened to a number of different episodes. So, any new guests that I have here on the show, I'd like to get some context about, where they're based, kind of their hardcore origin story. Obviously we're going to get into some of the stuff you're doing with the blog and the bands, but, tell me about the first time you either went to a show, saw a hardcore band,
Mm.
even just heard screaming for the first time. Break it down for me.
Sure. So I've lived in Virginia for most of my life. I'm in like the South. People get this confused when I tell them I'm from Southwest Virginia because they think, oh, you're from the South of West Virginia, the state, but it's Southwestern Virginia.
Right.
So I'm in like the mountains, kind of like the last major city before you get into really like coal country, and a lot of like commercial farming.
Sure.
I think I got the first time I probably heard screaming music was honestly probably through Warped Tour playlist, because I think that was the first like show where I actually saw screaming. I think it was 2007, and I set my friends on fire, which I think was pretty insane.
Love that.
That shit was pretty dope.
Yeah.
And then the OG iteration of Escape the Fates. That's probably the first two bands that I saw that had like screaming in it. But as far as shows here, I mean,
Craig Mabbitt was the original vocalist, and then he went over to Bless the Fall. Was that right, or was that the other way around?
I believe so. I think he went over to Bless the Fall.
I think it was the other way around, because I think
so.
Because Bo Boken, who is married to Lights and all that shit. I think he was in Bless the Fall, and then he came over to Escape the Fate. Oh, because it was Ronnie Radke was in Escape the Fate.
Yeah, didn't he murder someone? Didn't Ronnie like murder someone and he went to jail?
Oh yeah, that dude. Like the fact that he's still making music, I was like, bro, I think it's over. But again, there might be some closet Ronnie Radke fans who listen to the podcast, so I won't shit on him too much.
Oh, dude, I don't doubt it. I've seen a few Escape the Fate like Spotify songs come up when I'm looking at stories. I'm just like, it's interesting. I mean, it's good stuff. Like I'm not good. I can't speak on it personally, but the music, I mean, like it was good then. And it still holds a little bit now.
Sure. Yeah. So Warped Tour. You're just seeing like especially like I set my friends on fire. That was shit that was just like so just in your face that you couldn't ignore it at that, during that time. So what was next after that?
So next after that, I mean, I got into the whole Warped Tour thing and metalcore, and it was through honestly my own research, because I started being really into like archiving at a young age. I'd say like freshman year of high school. Like I was like looking to see like what bands can I find. Because I was never satiated. I just had to keep looking and looking. And then eventually I just stumbled upon a YouTube channel. I don't know if it exists anymore, but it had a Comeback Kid video, music video, and a Sigvidal video. And I was like, yo, this is a lot different from like The Devil Wears Prada or something like that. Like this is interesting. And it was just a waterfall effect. I just kept going into it, learning about straight edge, learning about like hardcore, and eventually I found a scene in Roanoke, because like the scene in Roanoke's kind of, I guess, a traditional hardcore scene has existed probably since the later 80s and 90s, but it really went into full effect, I think, in 2006, 2005. We had a band, I guess you could say it's a joke band. It was called Knuckle Puck, but it was based after that hockey movie.
Oh, okay. So not the pop punk band.
Not the pop punk band, no. Okay. But it was like a hardcore band based off like, is it the Mighty Ducks? I don't know if you know anything about.
Well, like that would make sense. I'm not as big a Mighty Ducks fan, as any regular Joe or whoever. But yeah, like that I like. We'll just this isn't like, it's always sometimes like different things come up on the podcast, and I'll like listen back. I'm like, nope, that's incorrect, or that's you were close, but we're not here to get every single fact correct.
Sure,
but
we're wrong with it.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So there's like, this joke band Knuckle Puck is from your kind of neck of the woods, it sounds like.
Yeah, it existed for like a couple years, and I think that's the first band that actually did full touring. Like I think they did a couple of Florida, Texas runs and stuff like that, and I think they even had like a small label. But it was around that time that I found, and it's coincidentally we're doing this during Pride Month. So our major venue was called the Big Gay Mansion, and it was called that because, it's really sick. Honest to God,
come see us at the Big Gay Man. That's so rad.
It really is.
That's such a flex for a venue name.
Oh yeah, especially back then, like being in the South and having shows of that name on it, like probably 6 or 7 years before like gay marriage was legalized in the States. Right. That was just like it was a huge flex, and it was also just like something we took pride in. Like, and so we just started going to shows there. I stumbled upon like I think a Handguns show, like pop punk band. They had played Roanoke a few times before they got super big. And so I saw them, and then we had like a queercore band called Meat Down. It keeps getting a little bit funnier. But it straight up was like power violence filled with like most of the dudes were like gay or somewhere on the LGBTQ spectrum. And then I think my friend Zach played drums for them, but it was really insane because like they would just get like almost completely naked and people would just be fucking moshing with their shirts off and it'd just be like a huge sweaty mess. And that was like the first time I saw like real moshing. And I was just like, dude, this is insane. I need to keep coming to this. And I can remember trying to talk to people after the show, like begging them to be in bands with me because I really wanted to be in a band. And so kind of where it all began with my, I guess, hardcore musical career, if you want to call it that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is cool. Like it seems like most people have that, like, saw something at a bigger scale, whether it's like a huge tour package or Warped Tour, things like that. But then once you're able to find that in like your very niche and small circles and have just as good, if not better, of an experience, that kind of like galvanizes it forever.
Yeah.
So understand a little bit of that foundation for you. We're gonna fast forward a little bit. So I'm sure like I said, it galvanizes it. You're going to as many shows as you can, blah, blah, blah. Did the idea of what it takes come kind of before like the interest of bands, or were you kind of doing bands prior to that and then that came later on?
Yeah, I had been doing bands probably since 2011. So I've had like 3 or 4 different ones, most of them being kind of hardcore. Falling along like Holy Terror, kind of like 8 through 8, 9 stuff. For some reason, that really latched on to Roanoke in like the early 2010s, and so that's what we kind of played. But I've always been doing what it takes stuff, I guess, if that makes sense. Like I can remember having an external hard drive of, I think I had at that point like 14, 15 days worth of music, maybe 20 at most of hardcore. And I literally just crashed my computer from it too. I had like a really shitty
so
desktop.
Much hardcore, it was like it just couldn't handle it anymore.
Just overwhelmed it, yeah. And I've lost many of those because I'm bad at technology. I tell people all the time I'm like a boomer with technology because I just don't know how to operate things. So but I've been doing that for a long time, and just being in bands kind of helped me with playing with other bands, and it just like put me on to even newer music. So I think they've gone kind of hand in hand, really.
Yeah. Like you were saying at the top of the first question, it sounds like the obsessive nature of archiving was something that was so foundational for you, and that was very similar to me. Like even just playing in some really shitty like metalcore bands or melodic hardcore bands, like I was obsessive about like, okay, before we start playing, I want to set up like my Flip Ultra HD in the back of the room so I can record our set. I didn't upload it. It was just literally for myself to, be at home and just watch the, how a song was received, how like different people interacted with different things, just seeing the venue. And now those are like memories that I'm so happy that I like, even not like it's I think people get confused on like doing anything that's like archival or content wise in our in our scene for recognition or views or engagement or things like that, versus like, no, like it should be like for yourself first. Like you should appreciate that and see the importance of that. So no, it sounds like for you, it was like very early on, like, no, I want to, have a list of different things. I want to have as much music as I can, whether it's going to crash my computer or not.
Exactly. Because I mean, with hardcore in particular, you have like the actual like subculture and like history behind it too. So that's like what also I think further peaked it. Like with other music, I mean, there are subcultures that exist, but like I often try to describe hardcore, and I think a lot of people might disagree, but it's kind of like a movement in a weird way. I mean, it started and sprung from like late 70s, early 80s punk, and it still exists. Gosh, it's like 40 plus years on, and the history of that, especially because like not much of it's written down. You can have lyrics and stuff, maybe like magazines or zines from back then, but there's not like a written history of hardcore necessarily. Right. So like, the way to do that pretty much is do it like orally through bands. Like the more bands you discover, the more you'll kind of get a sense of what hardcore can and should be. And it's just, I guess that's just another aspect of it, just the history too.
Yeah. Like there's been a couple documentaries that have come out, and, whether it's like full bore DIY as possible, You know, like growing up in Winnipeg, there was like a Winnipeg hardcore documentary that came out. I think like maybe 10 years before I was in the scene fully. And that was like DIY as fuck. But then you have that to like, you know, Noisy doing like an entire, like doing a recap of like New York hardcore and the foundations with like the Cro-Mags and Agnostic Front and Sick of It All. But what's crazy is that like, I've rewatched that documentary so many times, but even if it was like Netflix was like, okay, we're gonna do some kind of doc on the state of hardcore where it is right now, like the series would be infinite. Like there are so many different stories and intricacies and different scenes. Like, you know, like Calgary could have like 10 episodes, Western Canada could have 100 episodes, Virginia could have like 30 episodes. Like it's just like it's one of those rabbit holes. Like the more that you dig into it, like you're like, wow, like there's so much flavor and culture here, like you were saying, and like that's like where people feel ostracized in a lot of cases. It's like, oh, I can actually call this home in a way.
Exactly. Yeah. I was gonna add something, but like, nah, you hit the nail on the head. So I don't know what more I can add to that.
No. It's like, yeah, there's so much here to, you know, whet your palate with. And I think it's one of those things that, you know, people can, you know, I think it's highly encouraged for people to get involved, but like getting involved can look in so many ways. It could be, you know, filming shows. It could be starting a band. It could be putting on shows. It could be like making a hardcore podcast. Like it's one of those things where there are people that are definitely like spectators. They'll go to a fest. They'll, you know, travel around. But it is one of those things where there's very little barrier to entry, it seems.
Exactly. You know, and I wish that was more stressed upon when I was like younger, because I feel like back then, even though it's only like 10 or so years ago, it's like the focus on participation was like either you're going to be in bands or maybe you'll do like a record label. And like to me, especially I guess in my scene here, there wasn't much focus on like doing zines or like podcasts or just like doing tables at a show or something like that, or even just archiving. It's just like it seemed a little bit more narrow. And now I think because of like the pandemic and things like that, especially, people have been able to kind of like get in touch with their creative side, and I've seen more zines pop up, which has been really, really sick. Podcasts are becoming more common, and I feel like the more you let people participate in the discourse of what hardcore is and like advancing like hardcore and keeping it, preserving it for later generations, I think the better off we are. And I'm really honestly excited. I think I've told you that in private. It's like hardcore right now is fucking like perfect. Like I love what's going on right now, and I'm hoping the energy that we're seeing right now is gonna last quite a few years.
Yeah, like to go off what you said there, like I think you're absolutely right. Like growing up, it was like you play in bands or you book shows.
Yeah.
And maybe like there would be someone that would, you know, start their own DIY label. And like I remember even when I was growing up and people were doing that, like I heard people at shows being like, yeah, that's cute. Like because it wasn't a huge label.
Sure.
It was like, you know, like, oh, you're going to do that? Like that seems like a waste of time. And I know for a fact that because like I've grown any amount of like influence through hardcore, through filming bands, doing this podcast or playlist, that upsets people. And because it's not the traditional way of, you know, being in a really hype band and touring for years on end, or, you know, booking, you know, as many shows as possible. But I think the thing that's important, and I think all aspects are like as critical, because there's a lot of really cool scenes that are booking shows and have really cool bands, and they don't have anyone filming those local shows. And I feel like if they did have someone filming those shows, they would like kind of rise above some of the other scenes in the world, right? And it goes the same way. There could be someone that films shows and someone that books shows, but like maybe there's not good bands around. So like everything all plays in this like shifting of gears where it comes to like all these different and we've talked about this in private as well, but just like the different responsibilities that go into like what a hardcore scene, like a local hardcore scene is, right?
Yeah, and like I'm trying to wrap my head around this. I think about this a lot. I'm just trying to make sure I frame it right. But like when I started What It Takes, I wanted to kind of give everyone an equal playing field, kind of just like level the playing field and have it to where like I'm focusing on like the big names like Drain, Gulch, you know, like those big bands that are in everybody's minds. But I also want to focus on like smaller regional acts because like talent's everywhere. Hardcore has always been everywhere. It started in the 80s and it's all over the globe. You see it everywhere. And like there's certain places that don't have the resources to like amplify the bands there and show love for them to like everyone can see it. And that's what the point of like what it takes is to like help raise other voices to make it more diverse and also just to show that like hardcore just doesn't exist in the anglicized world. I feel like that's a thing that happens when you grow up in like the States, or maybe it's like that in Canada too, where you're like, okay, there's so much hardcore here. I don't really need to expand my mind further to like what's going on in like Eastern Europe or what's going on in Australia or in Southeast Asia.
Right.
And when you do that, you're like if you did that this year, for instance, and you just didn't think about that, you wouldn't know what the fuck Whispers is. And Whispers is fucking bang on. Like that's like one of my favorite releases of the year. And like the more you open your mind, you're just I think most people would end up like me where you have so much shit to listen to, you're never gonna get bored. And it's just gonna make it's a rich experience that way.
Yeah, we're definitely going to chat about how you've been able to connect with like so many amazing international artists through different means. But you're absolutely right, because I think a lot of people get stuck in like it's almost like there's bubbles. There's like their local maybe hype hardcore scene, and then there's the US bubble, and then there's like maybe some Canadian influence just because we're next door neighbors. But I won't even say that, because I feel like we get lumped into like international artists, even though we are like the closest place that people in the States can tour to. But you're totally right. Like Whispers is a band that comes to mind that's like fucking killing it and getting a lot of attention, like North America wide. Like Despise is another great example of how they've been able to like infiltrate and just get on people's radar. But what's crazy is at the same time that all these bands are getting all this attention, there's still that high like hurdle of just like getting overseas and playing that shows. It's not like they just appear like that. So I like, ideally, if there's just more attention on multiple bands from different regions, more bands will come there, and vice versa. More people will go and check out those scenes, and the US bands will go to Europe, or the US bands will go to Singapore or Thailand, or all these crazy places where, when I'm looking at some of the lists that you're curating, I'm like blown away. I'm like, where is this country? Like, and maybe we can use that as a segue. Just like talk to me about like, okay, I'm making the Instagram, I'm claiming the handle, because I'm sure it's like really blossomed into something that you really didn't anticipate. So talk to me about that.
So like I had been thinking, because I think there was a period where like I wasn't listening to hardcore as much, and I started really, really getting back into it again in like 2017. So like the 2 years prior, 2018, 2019, I was monitoring what was coming out, but just doing it for myself, kind of like we were talking about earlier. It really was archiving for my own personal interests. But then I had gone overseas to the UK, and I went to a hardcore show in Wolverhampton, which is over near Birmingham. And I just been thinking about how cool that show was. And then seeing some of the UK bands, I think Big Cheese played DC in December of 2019. I went to that as well. It's like, I was just kind of just amazed at how interconnected we've become in hardcore. Like we're just like, bands are able to come overseas way more than they used to be. And I just started looking at the releases for like January of 2020. I was like, you know what? I have so much knowledge about what's happening. And I think I might, I don't want to like get myself too much on airs, but like, I feel like I know a lot of what's going on more than most people, just because of just my insane interest in it. And I was like, I just need to share this with everybody else.
Right.
I really want to make sure that like everybody else knows how like cool hardcore is right here, right now. So I've just been doing what I've always done, which is like Bandcamp, which is my preferred site for music. Honestly, like I like Spotify. I don't pay for Spotify, so I have to listen to commercials. So I just go to Bandcamp a lot of the times. So I just look through the hardcore tags, and I found like really cool stuff. And I'm just like, dude, it always amazed me, because I know hardcore exists everywhere, but I find a lot of stuff from like Indonesia, like there's so much going on in that country. I could probably talk about that for hours on end about what Indonesian hardcore is like.
Right.
And so like, I just really wanted to just like share my knowledge with everyone else. And it just kind of started off like as an innocent project where they're like, okay, I'm just going to talk about releases that come out. And then it slowly came like, okay, now I'm seeing by following other people, like, oh, there's a lot of people doing really cool artwork, or there's people like you. Like, I think you were one of my first posts I made about scope exposure, about filming.
Right.
It's like, all right, there's people filming really cool shit. And I just want people to know that too.
What? I think that might have been the first crossing of paths, because I remember like I got the tag and I was going through the post, and I think it was right because the last hardcore fest that I went to and that Scope got to film was Snow and Flurry Fest.
Yes.
And it was all those screenshots of all the different, like, because we were kerning those out. So yeah, that must have been the first time that that kind of the I just getting tripped on my words here. The paths crossed. But yeah.
It is just like, it just became like a whirlwind, because like I've started to notice like other things that are going on, and just like, and it just happened to coincidentally be around the time when shows like stopped being a thing. Because I mean, I started in January, March of April was when pretty much the rest of the world started shutting down for shows. I'm just like, and I started thinking then, it's like, you know what, I need to like go full bore on this and just like continue to do this and try to put content out every day, which is really difficult because I'm trying to establish a good balance between this work, other things. But like, I get such a joy in just like gassing people up that deserve it. Cause like, there's so many people that do good shit. Like, obviously you have like for labels, for instance, like you have the big names, you have Close Casket, Triple B, Death Wish. You have all these really cool things going on, Quality Control in the UK. But then you go into like smaller labels like Days, Streets of Hate with that All Due Respect release yesterday. That shit's really good. And like in Canada, Homie Shit Magazine, like that's also one of the first posts I made. That shit's so sick, dude.
Yeah.
And I think I just don't want it to get, because I've seen hardcore be very insular, where you're like only in your little bubble and you're hyping up people in your scene. I just want that love to be spread everywhere, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
1,000,000,000%. Like it's like I kind of go with the mentality, you know, whether it's through like doing the very bare minimum, especially to support these bands during this time, for me is like, hey, you have a new release, I'll put it on this monthly playlist. And that has really like connected me to all these different bands. But if it's something that I truly am like amped about, like sharing that, or, you know, reaching out to do a podcast and like really, like you said, like gassing it up at up front. And, you know, I think that love and appreciation should just be given to shit that you genuinely like, whether it's like your homie or like people that you grew up with. Like I think hardcore really needs that, because everything like word of mouth or just like share wise, like that's how bands like really skyrocket, right?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Like it's crazy to see some bands like literally come out of nowhere with like a demo, and then just like, okay, like, is this band gonna play LDB when that comes back? Is this band gonna play This Is Hardcore next year? Like, you know, because it's such a, you know, like that's how things really push, and especially that's needed when there's so much you know, saturation when it comes to, you know, hardcore bands that are coming up.
Oh yeah, and just to kind of expand on it even further, I mean, like
Please.
I feel like back in the day, you really had, yeah, I'm sure you've experienced it before, where you have certain things that are like what's in right now in hardcore, and that's what's preferred to talk about instead of like stuff that people don't know about.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that kind of gets thrown to the wayside, because like if everyone's talking about the same releases, I mean, it just gets dull and you lose interest. And so like, why not just expand the discourse on what you're talking about and enjoy like the Gulch and Tsunami split, but also, you know, enjoying like the Living in Fear LP or the new Satisfied record that came out. I mean, there's just so much, like, I don't know. I get very like, I almost feel like a child in a candy store sometimes when I talk about hardcore. There's just so much, man. It's hard to really put into words like how important it is to just like, in order for the scene to keep surviving, it's just like we have to become more interdependent on each other and just not separate ourselves between what's cool or what's like cheesy and cliche. Just like bring it all in.
Yeah. And I think like I try to be as empathetic as possible. Like everyone's only got, a certain amount of time in the day, even just to sometimes even listen to hardcore music. Like maybe they work a job where they can't have that in the background. Maybe, maybe they have road rage when they listen to hardcore while commuting to and from work. But even if you had someone who had like an hour a day to listen to hardcore, 9 times out of 10, I think people opt for like their daily mix, like something that's like self-curated. Like there's times where I don't go that route because like I'm listening to a lot of stuff that I'm prepping for Scoped, whether it's like, oh, like let's listen to this playlist that I'm curating, what else could go into that. But when I do jump into my daily mix, it's like a lot of band, like there's a like, and it's not to say that you can't listen to bands that have been broken up, but there's like bands that like are being recommended to me that I'm like, well, what about the new bands that are coming up? There's like a lot of great picks here. Like, Spotify's algorithm is great, but and that's something that I've thought of like, how can, through my playlist and, the things that I'm doing, like continually like push the new bands that, maybe don't have that, hardcore clout, wherever they're based. Like if they're in like Fargo, North Dakota, that band could be just as good if that band's from LA or New York City or whatever it is. So, as far as like, so you guys, so just to clarify, did the account just start with you and then Dakota came in the mix of that, or tell me how? I guess when I'm chatting with What It Takes in the DMs, like I assume it's you, but like I'm always like, oh yeah, Dakota's in the mix of that. So tell me the working relationship that both of you have.
I will, just 1 second. I just realized my charger is not plugged in, so
okay.
Yeah.
Grab that. We don't want an episode that just dies in the middle.
There you go. My bad.
All right. So, all good.
It did start off with just me. And then once I started doing things on like more of a daily basis, and I guess it really started off with the zine because I was just like, it was a late idea back in like early falls. Like, I really want to put out something physical. I've never done anything like artsy or put out anything that I produced myself. So I was like, maybe I should try doing that. I have time on my hands. Why not give it a shot? So having to go back.
This beautiful piece of document, and I just have to commend you. The quality on here is like insane. Like the fact that this feels like an actual book that I would like pick out at the library is like crazy.
Yeah, I feel weird calling it a zine sometimes because it looks like a magazine or like a tabletop book.
Right. Yeah, this is something at like the orthodontist's office, and you're like, like what's this about? But anyways, I cut you off there.
That's all good. So like I like you've seen me do. I cover on like a bi-weekly basis, like what's come out in the months, and I've had to like listen to everything over again in full. And I was like, this is really a lot to do. And it just so happened that I just started hanging out with Dakota again. I've known him for, God, I'd say maybe close to like 8 or 10 years. And so, because we've like gone to shows together. We're briefly in a metalcore band together. So we have a shared history. And I was just like, hey man, I don't have the brain power to listen to all this and also make new content on What It Takes. Would you help me go through the list of stuff I have here? And he just willingly said yes. And so we just started like sitting down on his table and just looking through Spotify. We just like stare at the screen for hours and just like listen to releases and just like talk about what belongs here, what might not make the cut. And he's just been helping with that ever since. And so he's like my main person to like run ideas by, because like I think it's good to have a second opinion, because like I'll get lost sometimes, and like I try to be as unbiased as possible, but there's some like types of hardcore I really, really enjoy, and he might be able to be like, hey, this is really good, but maybe not the quality you're looking for. And he'll be able to kind of like let me think. And I'm like, okay. I have a tendency to love everything. And he'll be like, no. Let's tailor this a little bit.
Right.
And then I've talked about this a little bit, but I think it would be surprising. There's actually a third person that's in What It Takes. I post about him every now and then. His name's Noah. He's the one who does the Hardcore Encyclopedia, which I'm hoping to release in the next few weeks for 2020. It's like he pretty much went through 1,800 bands last year. So that's how much I cataloged. And he went through each of them to make sure like the information I had was right, and also to see
Sure.
what streaming services they were on. So like he was putting in like mind numbing labor of like listening to everything, like literally
Dude.
everything. And
That's so crazy. So tell me about that project. Like, is it going to be a deck that's like this deep of just like different hardcore bands, or like, you know?
essentially it's like everything. Cause like with the stuff I post of like what I think I would enjoy. Cause I think it's an interesting thing to talk on. Cause like most of the stuff I post, I enjoy, but there's some things that are like like subgenres that I don't really like have like an interest in.
You're not gravitated towards it.
Yeah, but I can still understand just listening to it, like instrumentality and just like the vocal stuff. Like, oh, like, this is in its own little subgenre. This is really good, and I can look at it outside of me just liking it, and I'll post it. And so, like, he kind of has that same approach. You just like listen to everything, and on the encyclopedia, it'll just be stuff that maybe is just like someone's solo project. Like that includes like everything in hardcore output, even if it's something that's really really rough. Like I just wanted everything to be cataloged because like. I think everyone has the potential to make a good band. We've all been in shitty bands. I can't. I've been in quite a number of them, and I think it's just good to catalog bands that might not be like up to par to share with everybody else yet, and just show the development. Because I'd be curious to see if I keep doing this every year. Like, oh, this person was in this band, and now they're in something like this that's signed to a label and they tour. Like, interesting. Just to kind of just
right.
See.
Yeah,
and
like
yeah.
I was just gonna say like it's come up a couple of times on the podcast, just the morality of different hardcore bands. Like it's weird talking to people that aren't in hardcore and they've been jamming with the same individuals for like 10, 15 years. But like some bands shouldn't last more than 5 years, if that makes sense. Like put out a cool demo, like put out like maybe like an EP, maybe an LP, you know, if you get like, you know, I think it was Tyler from KOTP just talking about like how, you know, like a band like I can't remember the example that we were talking about Half Heart, and he was like Half Heart as a band, you know, had their space and time, but like if they were still going on and making records, maybe they would lose a little bit of their, you know, overall legacy, right? You know,
I would agree.
Yeah, it's the same thing with like, you know, I don't want a band like Knocked Loose to necessarily like stop being a band, but it is like that thing, like how many records can Knocked Loose, you know, make over, you know, their career, and where are the jumping off points after that band ends? Because, you know, like spoiler alert, every band will break up or end at some point. That was something that was taught to me very early on in my lifetime. But like it is one of those things where, like you said, like maybe one person does a side project, like, and they put out a demo and it's like the sickest shit ever, and then that band breaks up. Like that should still be archived to some degree. Oh
yeah, because like it also helps to just look at the sheer representation. Because I almost look at it as like a demographic document where I'm just like,
sure,
where's the most hardcore output coming through? Like if you just ask the average person like what country outside the US or like the UK puts out the most hardcore, I would say like, I mean, Indonesia's on there. I mentioned them earlier. Like those kids are like probably the most devout followers of hardcore and like the subculture surrounding it. And like there isn't a week that goes by I look on Bandcamp, I'm just like, yo, there's like at least 3 demos coming out from somewhere in Indonesia or Malaysia. I'm just like, and it's just good to see, to have like proof, because you can say hardcore's worldwide and you can show some evidence, but this is like almost like a document. Like here is the actual like legit proof that it exists everywhere. It's not just in Atlanta. It's not just in Richmond. It's not in DC. It's everywhere. And it's not going to be a physical because that'd be such a pain to print. I think right now, as far as pages, it's like 43 pages, I think. Okay. And so I think what I'm going to do is just make a PDF of it. And I just wanted to be kind of like an open source thing. And I'm going to do that eventually with the zine, because I'm almost sold out of it. So once I finish selling all the physical copies, I'm just going to throw it up as like a PDF, because I want people to like, if they couldn't afford it or if they just missed their chance to get it, just to like look and see like, hey, if you want to know what 2020 in hardcore looked like, and from my perspective, this is some of the stuff that's shown through the rest of the release that came out. Because if you think about it in the grand scheme of that, like I included 218 bands, I think. And I said I listed 18. Yeah, on this. Yes. Yeah. And I documented like over 1,800. So if you think about that, like that's like the top one of 1% of like what the best is. So like really, I think they both serve each other really well. So I'm hoping to just put them up at the same time.
that's an honor that, you did 1,800 bands for this, and my band is one of those, 218 that made the
Dude,
cut. So I appreciate
I have a
that.
little story about that because we were
Oh,
listening to
okay.
your band. Yeah, we were listening to your band because like I didn't know you had played music. I guess I just didn't look hard enough. Like I thought you'd just been doing like videography and other things. Like, oh, you actually play music.
Firing
This
the
is wild.
shots. This dude,
Yeah.
this dude that like is smiling on the podcast. There's no way that he can write hard riffs. There's no way.
It was a welcome
You're not the
surprise. And
first
like
person to think that, but that is too funny.
really,
That yeah, yeah.
but we
It's
ended up.
literally there's always sorry to I do
Oh,
want to hear
it's all
the
good.
story.
Yeah.
But there's all these weird things when it comes to like I feel like I'm not I don't want to say misunderstood per se, but there's all these like different weird things with me in my experience in hardcore where someone's like, you know, even when I moved out to Calgary, people almost didn't realize it until like a year after living there because they thought it was just dry. Like I was like nutty and going anywhere that I could for shows when I lived in Winnipeg, and that same mentality, pre-COVID still applied. Like I would go to Vancouver, I'd go to the States, and people were just like, "Oh, you drove out for this?" I'm like, "Well, I guess, but like I live 15 minutes away from here," and they'd be like, "What?" And then the same thing with like people think I'm straight edge, even though I'm not like a heavy drinker. But I'm like, well, I am sponsored by a brewery, so like I'm not straight edge. But like, there's all these weird things. Like, you know, there'd be people. I think it was I had Hosser on the podcast, and they knew about Endgame, but like didn't know that I played. So like when I was like, I don't want to
Damn.
plug my own band. They're like, plug your band. And then I told them, like, oh, the Little Devil, that shit is so sick. So it's I don't know. That's a funny thing in my world where there's always all these weird things. But anyways, you were listening to the demo.
Oh yeah. Quick aside to that,
Yeah.
I think there is a kind of like an assumption that the people that have a lot to say for some reason are straight edge. Like back in the day when a lot of bands would
Okay.
talk on stage, like you'd see like a lot of melodic bands, a lot of youth crew bands have something to say, and more often than not, they're going to be straight edge. And so like I think that same principle is like applies to people like you and I. They're like, oh, this person has a lot to say. They're like doing a lot in the community. They must be straight edge as well. At least
Yeah,
that's just what I'm thinking.
people who are straight edge just love to talk about themselves, about what they're passionate about. But yeah, no, that's a funny take for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, so I was listening to the demo and I really liked it. And I was like, looking at Dakota and he's just like very just dead stare like in my face, like, this is fucking great. And I was like, and I was like, because like I really liked it, but he like over the top really enjoyed it. And I
Right.
was like, dude. And I kept listening to it, and I was like, I've seen what you're seeing now, because y'all have like, and I've told you this before, like y'all have like a good blend of influences where you draw from things that might not be like concretely hardcore,
Sure.
and I think that's what makes Endgame such a great band. And so like, it's undeniable you all belong on that list, like straight up.
Again, I'm very, very grateful for you to say such kind words, and I don't think I've sent you any of the new shit that we have in the works.
No, I need to hear it though.
I've teased you of what that will be packaged and who we're packaging that with, so to speak. But the like what you were saying as far as like influences go, like I think that was just me being so in this world for so long that I'm like, I want to write fast, cool music, but like I am gonna throw a part that's like definitely because I remember I was reading, I was like, you think I sound like Kublai Khan? And you're like, no, there's like nodes of that for sure. And I was like, well, that makes sense because Kublai Khan is one of my favorite bands. So like, it's not out of question for me to throw a little bit of subtlety in a hardcore crossover kind of band. So no, there's a lot of really cool things there. So yeah, we were talking about the encyclopedia. I definitely think that doing it as a PDF, like you were mentioning, allows you to update that and have it as an ever growing thing versus like,
Oh yeah.
as soon as you print it, it's like in a year's time, it's like, well, we could have an entire new deck of bands to put on there for sure.
Exactly. And I'm not all knowing as some people might think I am. People are like, how do you keep up with all this stuff? It's like, I don't know, but there's definitely stuff I've probably like overlooked or just not in touch with. And so I'm hoping just to preserve that. And I have a really long-term project. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but I'm hoping once this decade's over, I'm just going to make like a huge ass book. I'm just gonna straight up just like make something that's like an actual coffee table book and just be like hardcover and everything and just talk about the decade hardcore and
Dude,
include shit like that.
I back that idea so hard. That is like, again, I think it is one of those things where looking at untapped spaces in the hardcore scene, like you like I think, this podcast started like kind of pre-pandemic. But yeah, there's definitely been a lot of newer, hardcore podcasts that have come up. But like at the time it was like I kind of was listening to Axe to Grind at one point, and then it's like now there's like all these different ones. But I think being able to do a actual hardcover book and just like
Mhm.
like have chapters and like like exclusive interviews, like I would buy that in a heartbeat, and I would probably
Hell
buy
yeah.
multiple copies so I could just hand it out to other people. But yeah, I really like that idea. So you would probably, that's years of work, but you would probably do that at the end of the decade, like you said.
Probably so when I'm like officially an old head. I mean, I'm already pretty old. I feel like a lot of people
Right.
think I'm really young. That's another thing people assume. They're like, "Oh, you're like 18 or 19." Like, nah, dude, I'm like almost 29.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so I'll be like almost in my. That's really scary to think about. Almost like past 35. Like,
Yeah. Well, no, that's like that's the same for me. Like I'm 28, and it is one of those things that's like, what year is it officially that I become an old head? Because I feel almost just as youthful when I like as I do now when I
mhm.
first was getting into hardcore. And I think I have more knowledge as like a young adult to be able to like actually do cool shit that I wanted to do when I was like that young, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like you're a hardcore statesman, I would say.
Right. So one of the questions I had, like you were bringing up Indonesia as far as like being this like really unappreciated like hub of hardcore, like lots of shit coming through Bandcamp. And something that I really appreciate about your work is that you're able to connect to so many different international artists. Like what's the geographically furthest connection that you've made in hardcore?
Oh gosh, I would say. I mean, like I recently did that review of the peasant release Kingdom. I mean, they're from
Oh,
South
right.
Africa.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so like that's
They're
pretty
from Cape
far.
Town, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I mean, I think I've been in touch with pretty much every geographic region I can think of, as long as there's not a language barrier. I'm pretty much able to like get in touch with Indonesians, Australians. I've talked to people from New Zealand, and then I think the least, I think the area I haven't really touched upon a lot is Russia, just because I think there's not. I mean, there is stuff going on there, but it just operates a little bit differently than maybe some stuff that in the States. And so like, and also I think the language barrier too. Like, I just need to get my. I have a Russian friend that speaks fluently. I just need to like co-opt him and be like, hey, message these people for me, please, so I can talk to
Right.
them. I want to know what they're doing.
Right.
But I feel like it's become a worldwide thing. Like I'll get emails from people like, hey, review this. I'm from like northern Mexico, or maybe I'm like operating out of like Argentina or Chile. I'm like, yo, this is just fucking like, it's sick to see it all come together. Cause I feel like the one thing that makes hardcore so attractive is just like, I wouldn't say it's a utopian thing, but I feel like it operates in a way that people want the real world to operate, where like everyone is like on the same page. There's like still ways to make it better, but like there's more equitable treatment of people, and everyone's kind of just working as a community instead of just an individual, especially like in the past couple of years. And I think it's just neat to see the interactions that I have with like just people maybe that live 100 or so miles away from me, and then people that live oceans away. And it's really, really sick.
Yeah, it's pretty insane to get an email about like, and it's not from a press person, it's like some band guy or gal, and just like, hey, I saw your podcast or I saw your blog, and I play in this band, and it's like, whoa, your band's actually really, really cool. So it's like a no-brainer that I would want to, go down the path of trying to create some content with you. But yeah, it is one of those things where it's like I was saying before, like a band like Despise or like Whispers can maybe get that recognition. Like people will actually like give the time of day and pay attention, stream their shit, buy their shit, but it becomes like there's still that huge hurdle of them either going to that part of the country. Like the only band that I think in my time in heavy music that like really like sacrificed a lot to like get coverage throughout the States was like Parkway Drive, like coming
Yeah.
from Australia. And just like, I watched a lot of their self-made documentaries when I was like growing up, and just like crazy how they're just like, yeah, we flew across the world to like play a show to 30 people versus like I drove, a couple hours and played to 30 people.
Yeah, and that reminds me. I mean, I think they've talked about that on the Forge Ahead podcast, which is another podcast I've really, really been into, and like just the ability to have to fly across the continent, because the people don't think about how huge Australia is, and just flying from one coast to the next. I mean, to play a show that's essentially for like 50, 60 people. I think that's like wild and very commendable. I mean, it's neat. And the other thing I wanted to touch on is like the effort you put in, and you usually will get back. I mean, like. That's the cool thing about hardcore is like you'll be bumping like the Whisper stuff or like the Slant release that came out earlier this year, and like those bands are eventually going to make their way over here, and then you'll form relationships that might last a lifetime, and you'll have experiences you never would have experienced if you didn't give it a chance. And so I just like that it's a reciprocal love.
Yeah, I think that band Palm came and played This Is Hardcore a couple years ago, and like again going back to the daily mix, like they would always pop up in my suggestions. But yeah, like I think that goes both ways too, because even someone like Sunny who will go to Japan with Jesus Piece, and I'm here to film this festival, but I'm gonna go and film a couple of local shows, like a show that's like literally like in this tiny ass room, and maybe only like it's packed, but it's only like 20 people packed, and in not really having a filter of like, oh well, I'm only gonna film these kind of bands, or I'm only gonna film bands that have a giant audience, or there's tons of activity. That's something I learned like really early on when filming shows, is like you like just the gates are open, and anything that I see is gonna make its way to the channel, whether it gets 10,000 views or 10 views. Every band deserves that level of for lack of a better term, exposure.
Nice. I like the wordplay.
Yeah, of course.
And then just a quick note, I guess, before we move on to another topic. I wish people. I think about this all the time. Sonny is such like a huge figure in hardcore, and what he's done to like galvanize support for bands. Like he really, like when he covers bands, they like explode in like popularity and like exposure, and like it. I wish people gave him more credit. He really deserves so much more credit, and I wish people need to be riding for him, because like honestly, like I feel like when I was getting really into the hardcore archiving, that was like when K56 first started, and I watched videos. I think it was the First Step video he recorded. I watched that over and over again, and just like I've been following him ever since. And like, dude, he's invaluable. It really is just like someone hardcore looks so different about him, and I wish people would just fucking like embrace the shit out of him and just like talk about him all the time.
Yeah, and I think like when you again like Sonny's been doing his shit for over 10 years, and like that's something that I was like check myself, like not like comparing myself to him, but like as far as like filming bands, like he is the inspiration and in the biggest thing that I can correlate to. So it's always that thing where it's like, Scoped is almost 4 years old now, but there's still people that are like, hey, I come to you to find out about new bands. I come to you for like, my podcast consumption. So I think like building up a reputation like that is really, really cool. But as a second point, like you were saying, like it's largely a thankless job to make hardcore content, because there's a lot of gimme, instant gratification. And for someone like Sonny, I know that if he just was like, I'm not filming bands anymore, it would be felt by the entire hardcore community. So for him to like I can't even imagine what goes through his brain, where there's like, it's a passion, it's a responsibility, but it's also like, I know I could get more appreciation and just like all these different things. But I gotta commend him for just like, again, like without him, Scoped probably wouldn't exist, and I'm sure a lot of different other entities would maybe not be as stoked on hardcore, or even be involved for that matter.
That'd be fucked up, dude, because I need scope. I need that on a daily basis, man.
Dude, that's so kind of you. So maybe a general question that I wanted to ask you, and maybe you can apply this to Dakota and Noah as well. Like, and this came up in a question Instagram thing that I did kind of recently. I thought it was a really, it's a very basic, but it's a very great question. Like, like you listen to God knows how many bands in a yearly basis. Well, like what catches your eye and what catches your ear, just like to make you stop and actually pay attention.
I guess a few things. I mean, I try to not think too much about production because the access to like a good recording studio or to good equipment is, unfortunately, it's not equal everywhere. You're gonna have like some places like where you and I might have access to really quality recording. You're not gonna find that maybe in a band from like Ukraine or a band in India or something like that. But I like to see ingenuity in hardcore because like I do think there's a place for hardcore bands to kind of cover stuff that's like a direct take, like, oh, we're doing like a late 90s hardcore band, or we're doing a Foundation style like straight edge band. Like there's places for people to recreate that sound, and I think it's necessary too, because like if it's been really popular, why not continue doing it and carry the legacy onward? But I think bands bring in different styles of stuff. Like a band that comes to mind that keeps popping up, and I think it's going to be a big name, and when they start playing shows again, is Slope. I forget where they're from, but that release, a lot of people, I see it everywhere. People from Texas, like the Pacific Northwest, everywhere. It's like, this record is really good and it's bringing something new to the table. And I think that's something I look for. I guess the other thing is I like lyrical content sometimes. I used to be a big stickler on like reading through lyrics, and with the amount of bands I listen to, I can't do that with all of them. But if you have a good message, I think that's something that should kind of come back of hardcore. I kind of miss going to shows and hearing bands talk. Like, I think a good example is like Inclination. I mean, like I feel like that is the straight edge band to just get hyped on being fucking straight edge. And you just like,
and if you're not straight edge, you're like, oh, well, Tyler is amping me up that I want to be straight,
It is straight up, dude. Yeah. He's just like, he has so much energy, and you can tell that he like fucking lives for it. And so I think a combination of those two things is what I look for. And then I just am curious to see like how different countries and people in different regions, how their hardcore sounds different from other people. Cause I feel there's other stuff that like comes into play. Like you can have people, like I've been in bands before that like the people that play in the band don't listen to hardcore, but they're like trying to play hardcore for the first time. And I think that's another interesting thing too. It's just to see people coming from different backgrounds and just see like what they're going to bring to the table starting their first band. And so I think there's three things I do look out for.
Yeah, I really like that that idea of, there's definitely certain bands that have like that did a style that's like super timeless, or it just like resonated with so many people. And even if that band, again, like we're going back to talking about the morality of bands, like, should a band like Foundation last 20 years? Probably not. But like, their time and place and their impact is like undeniable. So there's definitely a lot of people that maybe start those new bands that maybe use that as the initial framework, but like can add and innovate and make it become something of its own, right? I feel like, if I can speak from my personal experience, like Endgame for me was like kind of like the 2.0 of a band that I played back in Winnipeg that was like pretty much a power trip kind of worship kind of band. But the fact that I was writing it definitely added in elements that like the person that was doing the writing for that other band wasn't even taking into account. So like there might be, some backtrack style stuff or some, Kublai Khan stuff. Like, for me, I've really, once I became aware that is starting, that has naturally bled in. Now I'm like really just like, okay, there are no boundaries when it comes to that for my music. And clearly like that has, caught people's ear, because it's like, oh, this isn't just like a power trip band, or oh, this isn't just a Trapped Under Ice kind of band, or this isn't just another heavier beatdown kind of band. So I think being able to throw your spin on things is crucial for sure.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of putting your own spin on things, I would be remiss if we didn't talk about your band, Hostile Takedown. So like you guys just put out I guess your debut demo.
Yep.
You know, it was super cool. Like again, one of those things where, you know, I'm sure that you played in bands like prior,
Hmm.
but it was like, you know, okay, now this is, you know, now we have this relationship and I'm getting to see you, you know, on the mic and all that. Also cool, like to see the artwork being worked with John, who's like a very close, you know,
Oh
local
yeah.
homie of mine. So yeah, just talk to me about, you know, the idea of that band and doing the demo and how it's being received in your eyes.
Sure. I mean, it kind of came from what it takes. I mean, Dakota and I were working on the zine, and we just kind of like looked at each other one day. It's like, dude, why the fuck aren't we making music? We're listening to all this cool shit. It's like, why are we do? What are we doing right now? And so we literally started. I think our first practice was January 1st of this year. Like as soon as the new year came in, we practiced, and we got some like people that have been in other bands to play, because our scene's kind of like shrunk a little bit here just because people have moved on, people gotten older, but there's like a core of people that are around my age and around my younger brother's age that are like 21, 22, and they're still really about making music. And so it's kind of interesting because not I think aside from myself and Dakota, I mean, the other guys really haven't been in a hardcore band. Like they played like a stoner metal. There's been a lot of like power violence stuff. There's been like really like metalcore stuff that's like a little bit more removed from hardcore. And so this is like some of their first attempts to make hardcore. And it's been interesting to see because I mean Dakota's writing all the songs. The riffs are fucking like unreal. He's just like a mastermind.
Right.
And it's interesting because both of us, I mean, I've exposed him to like I've, I want to say exposed, but I've pretty much like forced him to listen to a lot of music, and I think that shows in the riffs because like a lot of people compare us to like Bitter End, Holy Terror, things like that, and like he doesn't like really listen to any of that stuff. Like he has a pretty broad palette, and it's just interesting. People keep bringing up like, oh, you guys sound like Cleveland or Integrity, and it's like, okay, word. But yeah, we just wanted to play. We just wanted Roanoke to have another hardcore band because right now there's really just 4 bands from my area, which I'll plug real quick. Ironclad, who released the demo on War Records last year, has members of Heaven's Die and Outsider, and very good. And then you have Gravity Kong, which is a take on like Gravity Bong, obviously stoner metal. Those guys. Sick. When you were talking about like people have played together for a long time, there's 2 friends that are in that band that have played music for like over 10 years together. Like they've literally just like been playing so long that they get each other, and it shows in the music. And then there's a power violence band called Creased, which is like early Ceremony, maybe Infest in there a little bit as well.
Okay.
And so it's just pretty much everyone from that group came together in this band, and we're just like, we just want to write. I really wanted to write something that was like Dead End Path. Like I feel like that's a style of hardcore that doesn't get talked about a lot because they were one of Triple B's best bands, honestly. Like Wilkes Barre is like a breeding ground for such great hardcore. I mean, there's a lot of good shit going on. One Step Closer.
There's something in the water there for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. And so we kind of tried to do that. And I think it ended up a little bit different than we wanted, but I really fuck with the sound. And I think a lot of people have been really supportive of it. I've had a lot of people say it's my best project because I've been trying to just like find where I fit in a band because I've always done vocals. I'm not really talented in instruments, unfortunately. So, and I think the response has been pretty cool because I've been able to share with people I've built community with through What It Takes and then locally. And like now we're at a point where I think we're about to experience a rebirth of like hardcore for a newer generation in Roanoke because like we're about to get a new venue space, which I just learned about yesterday.
Exciting!
Yeah. And it's gonna be like a indoor skate park / like venue. So I mean, you can't get better than that. Combining skateboarding, hardcore go hand in hand.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the response has been pretty good, and we got other shit in the pipeline, which I can mention a little bit later on. But yeah, we're still grinding away.
Yeah, and the first Hostile Takedown show got announced and is coming down the pipe. Like, where's your thoughts at with like, because everyone has had either a public or a private take about like shows are going to be crazy when it's coming back, but there's all these like I think no one could have anticipated the irregularity when it comes to like different pockets of the world being able to put on shows.
Mhm.
And I don't know how you feel about this, but I felt like when I was watching some of those like the conversation about whether the first New York Madball show should have happened or not is
Mhm.
one thing, but I think hearing some of those people being like hardcore's back as like a global thing, I was like, I don't feel that, because like there was bands and people playing shows in Australia and all these places that handled this pandemic way better than a
Oh
lot
yeah.
of North America. But even being Canadian, there's a little bit of insight or just hopefulness to maybe do things in the fall, but like festivals are touring is like, okay, well, we'll have to wait till after winter. So like, I guess what's your, like, where does your mind go when it comes to the first set that you guys play, like and what's your expectation, I guess?
I think it's I'll speak on generally in shows. I mean, I think they mentioned this on an Axe Friend episode, and I kind of agreed with it, that there's going to be a band that's going to take the first plunge into something that's going to get critiqued a lot. So like obviously
Right.
Madball being like the premier hardcore band that's still like active from like the older days. I mean, should have happened at that size. I don't know. I think it was a little it was a little much, but I think you know something that people don't talk about a lot is that hardcore serves a purpose for people that is greater than what it might be for yourself. Because like a lot of people are like, I see critiques like, oh, is hardcore just your entire life? And some people are like, yeah, hardcore is like what I live
Right.
for. And like when you're
Right.
removed from the community for a long time, you have that really urge to get back. I mean, there's been shows that have happened in the States that are more secret. You've had, like you mentioned, Australia having like safer shows there. I mean, I've seen shows in Russia that happened like late last year, early this year, and like they're going for their own kind of thing. And I think you should always try to work with safety in mind. But like you get to a point, especially in the States, I'm sure you've heard it like on news, like we have to beg people to get the vaccine. So like you're at a point where people who want the vaccine have hopefully gotten it. And I think shows have been slowly phased in. Like it hasn't been a huge rush of like just show after show after show, but I think it's moving along in a way that I don't have a problem with personally. Just so long as things don't take another turn, I think the way things are going is good. I mean, like I'd be lying if I said, like, I'm sure you saw the videos of the Section 8 show that was outside with the
Oh,
helicopter.
dude.
That shit
I
was
was like,
unbelievable.
the Madball show was like, oh, there's a lot of people. And I'm like, oh, there's like a lot of people and fireworks and fires and just like crazy, crazy shit. But, I felt like that was as LA as it probably could get as far as the first show is concerned.
Oh,
So,
hell yeah. And then you have a
mhm.
couple of bigger ones coming up. Like I'm going to the Atlanta one in a week with Living in Fear, Minefield. That shit's gonna pop off.
Oh, dude.
I've already seen people, like everyone there is religiously posting it every day. It's gonna be wild. But as far as ours, I think because I booked the show with my friend Bailey. He plays in Outsider and Ironclad,
Okay,
and
cool.
we've been responsible for booking most of the stuff in the past 4 or 5 years. And we just wanted to do something regional. Like the 3 local bands that are like active the most are playing right now. Creased, Ironclad, and us. And then Fading Signal's another really good band. They're not from that far away, like 3-hour drive maybe. And I really like what they're doing. I think they're playing a style of hardcore that's near and dear to my heart. It reminds me of like Know the Score, like that middle era of Thousands, where it's like faster hardcore, but still straight up.
Sure.
And then now is another band that like kind of mixes Roanoke and Richmond, because my brother plays in that band. He plays bass for Another Way. And the guy who plays drums used to live in Roanoke for a while and played in some Roanoke bands. So like, I think it's just good to have people we're familiar with. Because this is the first show that's happened of about 1.5 years. The last show we booked was actually a Canadian band that came down. Stepping Stone. It was when they came down.
Oh,
yeah. So
really?
yeah.
So
that was the
sick,
last show we
yeah.
booked, was them, and I think it was a band from the Midwest. I can't remember that band's name, but we're kind of like,
think who that, like, would have been like Low End maybe.
I think it's that band that broke up. I think it had I feel like I had the word peace in it or something. I don't know.
Oh, Peace of Mind.
Peace of, there you go. Peace of Mind.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So it was their run. And so,
Right.
like I said, we're kind of in this transit for a period where hardcore's been kind of dead here, and this is the first show back officially. So like, I don't know if it's going to be wild. I don't know how many people are going to attend it, but I know like deep down we wanted to have an environment where we know everyone that's playing,
Sure.
and that there's just going to be a lot of love. And so it's likely just going to be 20 or 30 people that aren't in bands, and the rest of the people are in bands just popping off for one another. And I think it's going to be a really sick environment. I think it's going to really do well.
I think that will probably be the standard for a lot of scenes that are having their first show, is like kind of a local, not like a local to like a very like a local / regional thing, like one that hasn't happened yet, but I know is going to be an absolute like nutty show, is like the Gulch, Drain, Tsunami, Scowl, and there's been some lineup changes there, but like that, I was like, that makes sense, and that is so sick that is happening. And I feel like the New York show is funny because a lot of bands, again, were local, but like New York is, I guess, with it being outside and just New York being this wild place to live, it's like anyone off the street was probably just like watching, because it's like, what the fuck is going on? You know, like it wasn't like, and like, you know, there's some, you know, parallels, I guess, with the LA show. Like, I'm sure just word of mouth spread like, hey, we're doing this crazy show, and, you know, come through or whatever. But I think, you know, as far as like a genuine first hardcore show back, like for that scene, like it makes sense to do it with all your friends, you know, doing it with all your, you know, your homies. And then, you know, as things get standardized on the safety aspect, then there'll be the people that are like, okay, but let's drive, you know, 12 hours to Vancouver to do a show, or let's drive to these other states to, you know, see all those friends. Like you were saying, like hardcore isn't just like for you, it's for like, it's such a, like a sphere of importance to everyone. So Jack, one of the last questions I wanted to ask, and this kind of circles back to the what it takes stuff. You know, I try to keep up with anyone that I feel that is truly making like important and meaningful work. So in your opinion, what makes a good hardcore content creator?
Yeah, that's a good question. What makes a good content creator for hardcore? I think it really just depends on like the scope of what you're covering. Cause I mean, like, I think you can either take it from an approach of where I know exactly about this specific thing and I can talk about it. Like you have these niche pages about like maybe 90s hardcore, about like vegan straight edge. And you have like, they're talking about that over and over again, but they have so much expertise that you're learning different perspectives from it. Then you have people like myself, and I would include you in it too. I feel like you have expertise in maybe more things than I, perhaps, but I feel like we dabble our toes in different things and just try to bring stuff to other people's attention that come from a wide array of things in hardcore, where it's not just people were focusing just on bands or just on labels. It's just like any person that's putting out content, we're able to like kind of like collaborate with them and like ride along with them and help raise them up kind of together. So I think that's a big part of it, is the ability to like what you're covering topic wise, and also like just raising people up too. I feel like if you're out there looking to be kind of like secretive or gatekeeping about it, I think that like really kills the vibe. So like if you are going to create content, just be about the community, man. That's all I can tell you.
I'm gonna shout out, you know, a mutual friend of ours. I'm not sure how much you've chatted with Davin, but like I don't feel like Marked for Life, as far as the hardcore radio show or podcast or whatever you want to call it, would be as big of a thing as it is if Davin didn't focus on all hardcore. Because like the whole thing of that show is like anything from 2018 and on. Because, you know, what's happening is hardcore is fucking sick. And you said that too, like earlier on in this show, and I totally agree. I feel like there's so many great new bands, you know, there's people doing really groundbreaking things. So I feel like if Davin was like, I'm going to pull stuff from the 90s and the 80s, like, I think that would be like, okay, like anyone can do that. But for them to like focus on like the current and like the state of what's happening right now, I think that has really been like, okay, like that's what I'm going there for. And, you know, I feel like you, as any content creator, you know, being able to push the envelope and try different things, see what works and what doesn't. But like you were saying, just being able to either pick a lane and stick to it for, amount of time and, find your footing. Cause I do agree, like any place that has a niche is like, okay, I can go there for that versus like a very broad, like hardcore page, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, exactly. And
Mhm.
I think that's another thing to mention is like focusing on the new as opposed to like what already has been is important. Because I
Mhm.
think a lot of people get stuck in like, because obviously they just like bands deserve respect. You were talking about Madball, agnostic front slap shot, whatever. Like the people need to be talking about that because you don't want that to get lost.
Mhm.
But you gotta keep things moving and promulgate like new bands, new artists, so that like we're talking about John earlier who did the artwork for the Hostile Takedown demo. I mean, like to see him blow up, like I just see him posting more and more shit and covering more and more bands. Like that's just like the coolest feeling in the world to see that because like I just watched him grow over the year that I've been following him, and it's sick, and people are riding along with that. And like
Mhm.
you could anyone can go back to like older bands or go back to like more classic people that are doing stuff, which is good and they should be supported too. But like investing in new people and new ideas, you're gonna get sick shit. Like I don't think there's anyone that touches John right now as far as artwork. There's very few and far between, and like
Right.
he's representing Canada really, really fucking good. So
Yeah.
I love
I
it.
think it's extra crazy off of like, he's booked some of my older bands that I've played, and like I knew that he was always like drawing the like the posters for the show. I'm like, man, John's really good at what he does. And now I think the what the fuck moment for me was seeing him do the cover for the Tsunami, the latest EP. I
Yeah.
was like, okay, I think it's like game over at this point. And now he stays busy. So shout out to John, and I think that applies for everyone. Like being able to see Sonny, who was doing Hey 56 full time while still having a full time job and all that, but now to see him be able to fly all around the world and like put on for so many bands. I think that's amazing. And I hope and people have told me like even when we were like, hey, we got a beverage sponsor, which feels like a small like it's a I think it's fucking sick, but like for people to
Yeah.
actually share that same level of excitement because they know that like like I've been checking many beverages to be like we're gonna get beverage sponsors eventually, and maybe in 5 years it's like we're gonna be sponsored by Red Bull or any of the major powerhouse beverage companies in the world. So we'll have to see.
Dude, yeah, I'm loving that for you, dude. Like straight up. Like I hope one day you have both this podcast and then strictly one for beverages. I want that to happen one day.
Yeah, there has been thoughts like about a beverage podcast. There's honestly been more ideas around like different beverage businesses, if anything, like outside of scoped in its entirety. But like I think that's a cool thing too, is being able to just like build like learn lessons and life skills within the hardcore world and be able to apply that when you go to apply for a badass job, or you go start your own business, or even if you like are a new parent and you have a kid, like all these things ultimately like play a part in the overall like you just scope of everything. So and I hope one day Oprah Winfrey's like Rusty Bones or whatever, and she's like, so my recommendation is the What It Takes encyclopedia. That would be
God, that'd be
insane.
incredible.
Honestly, like I feel like the work that you're doing, and if you had any level of some kind of like I feel like any content creator that I'm thinking that is really like really working right now, if they had some, not like investor per se, but if they had like some kind of lottery amount that they would able to pump that into their project, it would just crazy shit would be coming out. I
Dude,
think
I think
from
about
your
that
end,
all the time.
yeah,
Yeah, because
right.
like if I could make this like my daily job like K56 is done and just do this exclusively, I'd have so much shit going on content wise, it'd just be unreal. Like I think about that every day. I'm just like, damn, dude, I could be covering like doing in-depth reviews of like every band I enjoy, just like
Mhm.
all the time. And then Who knows? Maybe one day, if it goes well, maybe I can make this into something like more concrete and legitimate, establish something like that. But for right now, it's just the ultimate passion project.
Yeah, yeah, and I feel like, you know, you got to grind for a number of years to even be in the conversation of like, can I start a Patreon? Can I do this next step? So, you know, and I think that applies to bands too. But Jack, this has been a fucking blast. I feel like I could talk to you easily for another 3 hours, but I want to be sensitive of your time and those things. The last portion of this podcast, as you know, is a favorite mosh story that you would like to share. So it doesn't necessarily need to be something that happened to you or you did or anything that is the first thing to your mind, is kind of how we end the show.
Hell yeah. I have two quick ones. I can talk about me moshing and I can talk about me getting laid out, which has happened a fair amount of times.
Let's balance the scales there.
So one of the last shows I was able to go to in 2020 was the End It Outsider run that they did on the East Coast back in January. And I went to their DC show and End It was playing. And I just remember just like, so like I kind of like lost track of what I was doing. And I just got so into the music. And I looked over at my friend and he's just like, he was talking to me after the show. I was like, dude, you were moshing in a way that fucking actually scared me. I was just like getting some fluid movement going. And he was just like dumbfounded. Cause like, I'm a pretty big person. I mean, like I'm like 250, 5'10", just very huge and muscular. I don't have that really good range to do spin kicks and stuff, but like I just managed to do something really fucking out of my wheelhouse and just laid one down.
You went like Super Saiyan from like Dragon Ball Z.
Pretty fucking much.
Kind of blacked out for a little bit.
Yeah, I was able. I think if I remember correct, I was able to do like some like weird like spinning arm thing into a two-step without having to stop, and it was good. It was good.
Love
and
that.
Then the other one, when I first time seeing DTN Down to Nothing was I saw him at this venue called Kingdom in Richmond. And I remember it just being wild as shit. And this guy, I often try to remember how far he jumped, but he's pretty much flew off stage and jumped and like just was going to hit the first person that he saw, and it ended up being me. And I just remember waking up on the ground, and I just like it was already been another song. God. Yeah, it was just straight up, just like from a movie, like jumping 15 feet and just like knocked me in the head. Right. It was still a great show. Like I love it. Richmond gets wild, and I have to give respect to them. And yeah, shit's starting to pop back up there too. And actually, before we go, I actually had a question for you because I was curious about this. Since there's not really shows happening right now in Canada, of the ones you've seen announced, which one would you go to if you could pick of the ones that are like coming up in the next couple of weeks?
Oh, like which show in the States would I want to go to?
Well, I guess in the States, or if you want to pick one elsewhere too, like anything you've seen announced that if you had the ability to go to, you could go to.
That's I like that you flipped the switch there at the very end to ask me a question. Okay. So I really would like to go to Promcore in October. I'm heavily considering that. Not like there's nothing in the works as far as like Scoped might be covering it. Like that's more as like something I want to meet Aaron in person because I think he's been doing a lot of really great shit, and I have tons and tons of homies from Oklahoma that I would just like to see. And like, you know, being able to go to one hardcore fest in a year's time would be sick. I feel like in addition, or if that wasn't the case, maybe I'll pick one that I know that the timeline wouldn't work with, like the border. It would be that Tsunami, Gulch, and Drain and Scowl show because oh my god, like insanity.
You couldn't pick a more violent show, honestly.
No, he really couldn't. It's like, would I even want to film that? Because like my camera like would probably be kicked out of my hand multiple times. So
no question.
Yeah. So I hope that answers your question, Jack. I really appreciate what you do. I really appreciate our friendship that we've built through all these weird things, and I'm looking forward to being able to officially cross paths and get to hang out. All your shit will be linked in the description and in the show notes of the video, but if there's anything else that you want to end on, the floor is yours, my good friend.
A few things. We are Hostile Takedown's doing a quick long weekend on the East Coast in August with Ironclad and Controller from Allentown. Cool. So yeah, it's really cool shit happening there. We got a split coming out with a UK band later in the year. So that's going to be, I want to keep that a little bit more veiled, but it's coming, new material. And then as far as like what it takes stuff, usually I think around this time last year, I gave a glimpse at what might be in the zine. So I'm going to post something like that next week. I have about, gosh,
It might
60
be
bands.
out by the time this episode comes out. But
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
shortly thereafter, I'll have at least 60 bands that I'm considering putting in the zine. So people get a kind of sneak peek at like what's been hot this year and what they'll probably see in the next edition. So,
Mhm.
and then more to come after that, I'm sure.
Mhm. Support your hardcore content creators, whether it's Scoped, Hey56, Jack, Dakota, Noah, all people working tirelessly for the love of the game. Thanks for coming on the show, friend, and we will definitely do it again in the very near future.
Hell yeah, man. Bless up. Much love.